What you also my book?
Our session today in corporate
No, no.
finance, we look at assorted questions from papers.
My book.
So we're going to look at the 2015 paper. Okay, so we'll do three theoretical questions and one calculation. So we'll look at unit one. Question number four, suggest reasons why directors might take a company private. So this is a formation of companies. And what measures can a multinational company take to mitigate or avoid effects of restrictions imposed by foreign governments on the repatriation of profits from overseas subsidiaries? And also explain what the agency problem is and how it affects limited companies. Okay, so this is a 25 mark question. It looks packed. So we'll start with reasons why directors would want to go private. To start with, we must understand that there are many um, forms of companies. We have what we call a private limited company. We have what we call a sole trader. We have what we call a partnership. So each of these ones have distinctive characteristics. And so perhaps it will be important that you understand the other forms of businesses so that we understand why a transition is important. Okay, so we have different types of firms that an institution can take up. So companies can have public companies, private companies, sole traders. So these are different forms that a company can take. So while companies are owned by a limited number of investors, like their founders or families or equity owners, over time, we know that directors would decide either to convert them into private or it would have an undertaking to become public. So we firstly will look at what a limited company is. What is a limited company? So we have what we call a private limited company. It is a company that is owned by a small group of people, be it a family or close friends. So shares here are not freely sold in the public. So we have a minimum of two and a maximum of 50 in many jurisdictions. So often a private limited company is an SME, a family-owned construction firm is a good example. We also have what we call a public limited company. It is a company that is owned by shareholders and their shares can be offered to the general public. So they're usually limited by the shares that they buy on the stock exchange. So here there are no restrictions on the number of shareholders and they're subject to restrictions of international reporting standards. We also have what we call a sole trader and a partnership. These ones have unlimited liabilities. Now, with the transition of these companies, there are reasons why a company would want to transition, okay, why they want to go to being a private rather than a public. So when a company is public, it undergoes a number of burdens that are there. So these burdens include disclosure of financial reports, auditors. You need to also have mandatory requirements. So directors would want to take a company private for many reasons. Number one, the reduced regulatory burden. So usually public companies are subject to extensive reporting requirements, like I mentioned, where they need to publish their annual reports, their quarterly statements, also to comply with the exchange regulations. So these processes are costly, they're time consuming. So when you want to go private, a company will reduce that compliance costs and administrative pressure. Secondly, you have greater managerial control when you are private. As a public, directors are consistently there to answer to directors, board of directors, institutional investors, and sometimes activist investors who just want to push their short-term profits, like the speculative investors who are the preferred shareholders. So when you're private, it allows directors or owners to make strategic decisions without any interference. So you have a small pool of people to be answerable. The other advantage is in flexibility in terms of long-term planning. So if you're public, you often face pressures to meet the quarterly earning expectations. Sometimes this is usually at the expense of long-term investments. So private ownership, usually it frees directors from those short-term um, termisms. So it will enable them to focus on research, innovation, restructuring, and also the gradual expansion. So why would a company go from public to private? Sometimes the hostility of takeovers. So when you on the stock exchange, even competitors are prone to buying your shares, so they can be bought easily. So you expose the company to hostile acquisitions. So the private company will shield directors from the risk of ownership, which is concentrated, controlled, and stable. The other reason is that of cost saving. Are we together? Are you understanding? This is a um,
Yeah.
8-mark question. So it needs you to really actualize what we're talking about and understand. It seems simple, but it's very applied. Okay, so I came from the background of the companies and the transitions. So it's 8 marks, you can give an 8 points or 4 points, but expand them. Then, yeah, I talked about cost saving. So you eliminate expenses like maintaining the stock exchange listings. You have to pay; it's not free. And in investor relations and auditing. So that cost is limited. Okay, so and cost saving, you maintain the cost so much. So by delisting it and you go private, it will eliminate what? These costs. So it will free up some resources that you can invest in other sectors. Then ease of restructuring. So directors here may need to restructure operations to downsize or diversify or even merge with other companies. So such moves will often attract criticisms. So from shareholders, from the media, even from the company's public. So when you go private, you are more private in the actual sense because you are prone to a flexible environment, like the employees that will just question a few decisions and changes without constant scrutiny. Confidentiality. So public companies must disclose their financial and strategic information, which sometimes will benefit what competitors who can steal that information. So when you go private, you keep sensitive information away from the public eye. Then attractive buyouts. So if directors believe the company shares are undervalued by the market, so this will initiate a buyout to a private company. So to allow them to secure ownership because you are not prone to scavenger competitors buying you. So a company, in a nutshell, will want to become private to allow directors to cut on costs, to have control, to shield the company from external pressure, and also to focus on confidential long-term strategies. This will enable them to do what? To make decisions that are more stable and efficient for the benefit of the organization. So this is how we answer the first part of the question. The second part of the question, what measures can multinational companies take to mitigate or to avoid effects of restrictions imposed by foreign governments on the repatriation of profits from overseas subsidiaries? Before I even talk about those ones, what risks can a company be exposed to in an overseas market? This question usually comes. What risks, if you're operating in, say, Mauritius, what risks do you expect to be exposed to? So there are many risks: political risks, economic risk, exchange rate risk, um, regulatory risks, cultural and social risk, operational risk, repatriation risk, security risk, competitive risks, environmental. All these are the risks that you can expect when you're operating in a foreign market. The political risk is that where um, governments may suddenly change policies and it may cause what? An arrest that will disrupt your operations. Economic risk, fluctuations in inflation or interest rates, these ones may harm your profitability. So if you're operating in a weak economy to reduce your what? Consumer demand. Exchange rate risk, the fluctuations of currency, especially if they are reliant on foreign currencies like the dollar. So a sudden depreciation in local currency may be risky. The legal or regulatory risk, these ones are differences in the laws, like the labor laws, taxation, environmental regulation. They may increase compliance costs. Cultural risk or social risk, misunderstanding on the culture. So local culture, traditions, consumer behavior, all these may hurt what? The reputation. Operational risk, this is a risk that is usually internal, where you have challenges in the supply chain management, that is in terms of transportation, infrastructure. Repatriation risk, where governments may what? Impose restriction on sending profits back to the parent. This is a risk that we want to talk about. Okay, security risks. These are risks to do with terrorism, crime, civil unrest, or that may endanger staff or property within the organization and you're in a foreign nation. Competitive risk, this is where there's strong local competitors based on the policies that may outperform you, giving locals more preference. Okay. Environmental risk, natural disasters like floods and earthquakes. So having mentioned these risks, so now we need to understand this aspect now. If you're working as a multinational company, okay, how, what, um, how do we mitigate the risk that we has been talked about there? If you're working as a subsidiary, what measures can a multinational company take to mitigate or avoid the effects of restriction imposed by foreign governments on repatriation of profits? So there are different measures. So you understand what the risk I'm talking about is, where some governments may restrict companies taking back profits to their own homes. So there are certain measures that can be taken to counteract such things. So now I need you to hear me very clearly. Okay, so here are some of the strategies that we can look at. Number one is what we call transfer pricing. Transfer pricing. So what is transfer pricing? What is transfer pricing? So transfer pricing is a strategy where multinational companies can set an extra or intra-company prices for goods and services strategically. So they'll start charging higher prices for goods and services that are supplied to subsidiaries. So the profits are then shifted to the parent or other entities in more favorable jurisdictions. So that is one of the strategies that can be used to counteract. Um, is that clear? Are you getting me?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I'm not able to. I'm in an office setup, so I can only listen.
Okay, all right. So we must understand the background of this question is that usually multinational corporations, they usually face restrictions from the host government that may seek to preserve the foreign exchange reserves. So they will usually want to encourage people to reinvest within their borders. So usually such restrictions may limit or delay repatriation of profits from subsidiary back to the parent company. For instance, Shoprite, it has subsidiaries in Zambia, Malawi, and different countries. So um, such restrictions usually are there to, they may limit or may delay repatriation of profits back to South Africa. So to safeguard the returns on investments and also to ensure that there's continuous flow, the multinational companies would want to employ a number of financial or strategic or even operational measures. So now these are the ones we're discussing. So here are some of the key strategies that can be used to mitigate or to avoid restrictions on profit repatriation. So one of them is what is called transfer pricing. So here, multinational companies would want to adjust the intra-company pricing on goods and services. So here, they will start charging higher prices for inputs that are supplied to the subsidiaries. The profits are then shifted to the restricted jurisdiction to the parent company, so or the affiliates. So this method, however, you should comply with the international tax regulations to avoid accusations of tax evasions. The second strategy is that of royalties and licensing fees. So the subsidiaries may have to pay the parent company for use of intellectual property rights like the patents, the trade names, the software. So these payments become legitimate expenses that a business might allow funds to go before profit restrictions are enforced. So you may intelligently say, okay, since you don't want money to come back to us, we'll charge these people for using our name and the like. And the other is management fees or service charges. So the parent company can simply invoice its subsidiary services for management consultancy, for training, for IT, all these funny costs. So these charges can reduce on the taxable income and will increase the direct avenue for transferring value back home. There are also what are called intra-company loans. So instead of providing subsidiaries with equity financing from the shares, the parent company will just say, okay, we'll give you loans. So the subsidiary will then make regular interest payments back to the parent company. So using this structure, you have a predictable flow of funds that will avoid restrictions on dividends. So this could be regulated. How else? Reinvestment locally. So national companies can reinvest profits in the expansion, modernization, and also diversifying projects within the host country. So this will prevent the capital being being um, used by the country in terms of taxes. So they just use that money to strengthen the subsidiary's market position. So the reinvested funds will later generate higher returns when subsidiary restrictions are relaxed. Then also in terms of a strategy of barter or intertrade. So in situations where the foreign exchange controls are very strict, profits can be repatriated indirectly through what is called counter trade. This which involves you exporting goods or services to the parent company or other subsidiaries in exchange for materials or products needed elsewhere. The other strategy that can be used is when you're using offshore financial centers. So multinational companies may route transactions through affiliates that are located in offshore jurisdictions with favorable tax treaties. So they'll free the currency convertibility in areas where repatriation laws are lenient. So this will create an indirect, yet very lengthy path to ensuring that profit movements is out of these hostile countries that have restrictive um, laws. Then also dividend reinvestment. So when direct repatriation is not possible, profits can be retained within the subsidiary and reinvested through dividend reinvestment plans. So this will save the shareholder value and positions the company for future growth. Last but not the least, hedging strategies. When multinational companies use financial instruments like forward contract, the swaps, options, these are all used to manage what? Exchange rate policies. And even if funds are delayed, this strategy will help to ensure that eventually the value is repatriated and the profits are protected. And also, you can use lobbying and negotiation. So they can actively engage the host government to say, okay, look at the industry, the market, the economy, how it is. So they can use industrial regulators or regional trade blocs to negotiate on exemptions that could be favorable for bilateral agreements. So using such lobbying, it can influence what policies that would be more flexible for repatriation. So these are ways in which the host company can help tap their monies back. Then urgency problem. You've heard about urgency problem. What is an urgency problem?
Is it where directors might want to run the company in such a way that benefits them?
How? Very right.
Sorry?
Yes, you're very right. Needed to. So in usually most companies, we know ownership and management are distinct. They are separate. Where we have the shareholders, these are the owners. They will delegate the decision making to the managers, who are the agents. So we have the principal and the agents. So these managers are expected to act in the best interest of the owners. But however, sometimes there are conflicts that may arise, which we actually call the urgency problem. So in understanding this problem, it is very important because it will affect corporate governance, it will affect decision making, and also it will affect the wealth of the shareholders. So there's what we call the urgency problem. So if you are the manager and you want to act, how will you act? Will it be in the best interest of the owners because you now want to balance up between the interests of the company and the interests of you as individuals having to benefit from the bonuses or having to benefit from the plowing back of the profits instead of borrowing? So the urgency problem is a very critical issue when it comes to corporate governance. So it arises when there's a conflict between the principals, in this case, the shareholders, and the agents, who are the managers or directors. So here, managers may act in their own interests, such as wanting to seek personal bonuses, job security, rather than maximizing the wealth of the shareholder. So this misalignment may in turn reduce the value of the firm and efficiency. So how do we limit this effect? How do we limit this effect? So these are the ways in which we can limit the urgency problem. Number one, we induce what are called performance-based incentives. Performance-based incentives. So when you induce what are called performance-based incentives, what will happen? You want to link the managers to be paid a measurable amount of based on their performance, KPI. So you're going to ensure that managers perform to the interests of the shareholders. So if you're going to give them even stock options of motivating managers to focus on long-term growth by making them become shareholders in a way, they will want to also benefit as shareholders. Secondly, you are going to limit its effects by engaging in what is called managerial shareholding, where you allow managers to own equity, like I said, in the company, so which makes them direct shareholders as well. So when managers also become shareholders, they'll benefit more if they're going to have the best interest of the company in their perspective. Then also strong corporate governance. So if you have independent boards of directors, internal and external audits, and a structured oversight mechanism where you're going to hold the managers accountable. So corporate governance issues will ensure that the decisions are made transparently and in the interest of the shareholders. Then number 4, you're going to monitor the shareholders. You're going to have active shareholders who can also exercise rights. So to vote and make key decisions. So when these participate in such board decisions, they'll demand for reports, they'll demand for strategic initiatives. So this continuous scrutiny will discourage managers from pursuing their personal agendas. Then also debt financing discipline. So you will also ensure that borrowing of funds, you impose fixed obligations in form of interest and principal repayment. So if they're going to get that money from you, you're going to take it as a loan. So to reduce the amount of free cash available for managers to misuse and will force them to make disciplined decisions. Number 6, regulatory oversight. So compliance with these legal requirements like financing reporting standards, corporate governance code, all these will ensure that you are working with the best interests of the company. So this was carrying about 10 marks, total 25 marks. Are we together? I hope this is clear and insightful. So when you have a chance, target the theories first, okay? Target on the theories first so that you don't limit yourself to calculations only. Right. So if there are no questions, I'll quickly go to, this was the 2024 paper, last year's paper. So you want to see how similar these questions are. So as the world becomes global, more and more companies are establishing themselves as MNCs, multinational companies. In the attempts to introduce new products and services, the market becomes what? They become market leaders and maintain profitability in foreign markets. So these multinational companies often face a variety of challenges. One of the challenges throughout is dealing with foreign markets and the fluctuation in current currency rates and movement of exchange rates stability. For instance, Danny states that by going global, multinational companies have become into contact with new types of risk. There are costs such as high insurance premiums, expensive security measures normally to avoid. In dealing with this, multinational companies have to interact with foreign governments and businesses in their respective foreign currencies. Furthermore, dealing with foreign currencies and sort any currency exchange fluctuations. So describe at least 5 ways in which you would reduce the risk of loss on financial currency fluctuations, especially in cases where exposure to is significant and currency is volatile. Okay, so you see, this is similar to a question that we're looking at, but in a more applied or different manner. So we're looking at what? How would you reduce on the risk of currency fluctuations? How would you answer that? So we talked about 2 important elements that apply to fluctuations of currency. The forward contracts, the futures contracts, and the currency swaps. These are the main. And hedging, of course. So this is about 25 mark question. All right. So this is how you'd answer it. To start with, you must explain with a small introduction to explaining how the scenario is. Multinational companies that operate in cross borders are constantly exposed to what? foreign exchange or forex risk, which comes due to fluctuations in currency values. And these fluctuations can affect one, the cash flows, two, the profitabilities, and overall the stability of the firm as a whole. So foreign exchange risk is what we're looking at. It arises from transactions, translations, economic exposures, and also to safeguard a company from such potential losses. Multinational companies must employ a number of risk management strategies that will help to do what? To stabilize their earnings. And the following ways are some of the ways that uh, can be used. Number one, we are looking at the forward contracts. So when we're looking at forward contracts, a private company in agreement with the multinational companies and the financial institution can buy or sell at a specified amount of foreign currency and at a predetermined exchange rate for the future date. So if you're going to look at the rate today, and the company would need to eliminate uncertainty tomorrow. So you would want to receive 1 million euros, for instance, in 3 months. So you can enter into a forward contract, a future or a forward contract to sell euros at a fixed rate. You protect yourself against a potential depreciation. Then you also engage in what are called futures contracts. So currency futures are usually standardized contracts that are traded in organized exchanges like Lusaka Stock Exchange to buy or sell foreign currency at a specific price on a set date. So unlike the forwards, here we're dealing with futures that are highly liquid and regulated, so they'll make them easy for you to trade. So the benefits are that you allow the multinational companies to hedge against the predictable exposures, and you can offer flexibility to close the positions before maturity. The other strategy is that of currency swaps or currency options. So currency options are there to provide you the right, but not the obligation to buy or to sell foreign currency at a predetermined rate before or on a specific date. So here options will give you flexibility as a firm to choose to exercise the option if movement is favorable, or you can let it lapse if it's unfavorable. Then also you can undertake what is called hedging. What is hedging? Hedging is that to reduce the risk of foreign exchange risk by aligning your revenue and expenses in the same industry with the same currency. Other strategies could be leading and lagging, where you deal with timing of adjustments. Leading is simply you paying or collecting early. If the currency is expected to weaken, you would want to pay or collect your money early. And lagging is where you're going to delay payments or receipts if the currency is expected to strengthen. So these are strategies that can be used in the event of currency fluctuations. We also have currency swaps. Currency swaps is an agreement to exchange principal and interest payments on one currency for principal and interest payments in another. So it can lead to a secure or favorable long-term financing in foreign currency. Diversification of currency exposure. So multinational companies can spread their operations and cash flows across multiple currencies. This will help you avoid the reliance on one single US dollar. So when you diversify these currencies, they will reduce your exposure. And also centralized treasury management. This is an establishment of a central treasury function that will allow the multinational companies to monitor currency exposures across their subsidiaries. Then they will be able to net off exposures internally and implement consistent hedging strategies. So these are ways in which that's 15 marks. These are ways in which exposure can be minimized. So any five, I've talked about 10. I hope you'll be able to remember. Okay. Then last but not the least, we have explain any 5 actions that multinational companies can take to limit effects of possible restriction of repatriation of profit. We looked at this in the 2015 paper. You can see 2015 and 25. I'm giving you that these questions are the same. So we talked about repatriation and talked about a number of strategies. Do you remember them? We talked about transfer pricing. We talked about licensing fees, management fees. You charge those management fees. You make intra company loans. You give them loans instead of you allowing them to borrow, so that you can charge them a higher. You reinvest in the host country so that you do expansion projects. You can also use offshore financial centers. You also look at dividend reinvestment retention schemes. So these are ways in which you're going to ensure that you overtake the repatriation strategy that will restrict you as a parent company from enjoying the profits. All right, so this is where our class ends.